Hi friends, today's video is going to be a list, because I love making lists, of my top 10 favorite horror books. I am going to put them in order because I like to play favorites. However, this list could probably change on any given day. I'm also going to say that I think that I'm pretty beginner to horror, so I would also call these all beginner recommendations besides the 10th spot, which I'm going to talk about right now. In 10th place, I will be putting A Video Night by Adam Caesar. The only reason I'm going to say that this might not be beginner friendly is it is pretty raunchy. This one, we're following our main character, who is just a nerdy boy who likes to have this thing called video night where he geeks out and watches scary movies. Well, he gets the nerve up to ask the hot girl next door to come to video night. And we watch that unfold while also watching said hot girl's sister become body snatched by an alien and essentially making a whole lot of alien babies and making people go splat left, right, and center. I thought this one was a lot of fun. It is heavy on the action. It's just a book that's going to start and not let up till the very end. We're just kind of watching these characters as they form relationships and they survive. I had a lot of fun with this one. It's campy and there's a lot of humor to it, a little bit of raunch, and I just thought it was really fun. So that's why it's one of my favorites. However, I get that this one probably wouldn't work as much for everyone because I feel like you have to be okay with the raunch. However, let's move on to a one that I think will work for a lot more people. In the number 9 spot, we have Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This one follows our southern lady who is living her southern life when she thinks that her neighbor might be a vampire. She takes this dilemma to book club, and they have to figure out how in the world they're gonna deal with their vampire problem. In a typical Grady format, this book is very campy and there's some humor to it, and it's not your typical horror story. I don't think that this book ever made me really feel unsettled. However, I just enjoyed my time with it. I actually am not a Grady Hendrix fan, I can't lie. This is the only book of his that I've liked, and I only have one left to read. However, I loved, when I read this one, it blew my mind, the societal discussions we had within horror, and that's something I really look for in my horror books. I was not expecting the nuance on racism to happen within this story, especially because it was about a book club and killing vampires. I just was not expecting that, and I truly loved that element of the story, and I feel like it brought the whole story to life for me and felt like such a real story with real victims, and I truly just enjoyed this one. But it does still have a little bit of a campy feel, so it is still got Grady's humor, but I think it's on the more serious side for Grady Hendrix. And in 8th place, we have Pen Pal. This one I read this year and I really enjoyed this one. This one had me feeling so unsettled. This is one of the books that has come the closest to actually scaring me. However, I still think it's so beginner friendly because of the way it's written. Essentially, we're following our main character who is remembering things throughout his life, and the way he does that is not in a linear timeline, and we have 5 short stories of different things that happened within his life that were horrifying and revolve around a horrifying element. I don't really want to tell you much more than that because I think that this book is so good if you just go in blind and you don't know what to expect. I think the 3rd story in this literally could have kept me up all night. It was so good. Thank you, Lexi, for making me read this because she definitely made me read it. And in 7th spot is the newest addition to this list. I actually recently read it. I actually don't think it's out at the time of you seeing this video because I read an arc, but in 7th spot we have The Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. This comes out October 31st, so I'm really excited for more of you to get your hands on it. I really did enjoy my time with this. Nat Cassidy just makes me feel unsettled throughout my entire time reading a story. Not necessarily because the book is your typical horror, but because of the behavior of the cast and people around them that just gives me this anxiety-driven feeling of just feeling claustrophobic and unsettled, and there's just something in the way he writes that really works for me and keeps me on the edge of my seat the entire time. The Nestlings is Rosemary's Baby meets Salem's Lot. We're following a couple who has been down on their luck. They recently had a child, and when having the child, our mother ends up with nerve damage and can't walk. They're dealing with having this newborn and having this new paralysis and what that means for them as a family, as her as a character, and everything like that, when they think that their luck is turned around because they win a low-income housing lottery where they get to go live in one of the most expensive and fanciest New York apartments on a budget that they can afford. And, well, everything is not as it seems at this apartment. And it just like goes from there. And I was just so unsettled the entire time I read this. So I hope you will love it just as much as I did. I feel like I should give an honorary mention to Mary that almost made this list, but just like didn't, just by the littlest bit, because I also loved Mary by Nat Cassidy. And in sixth spot is actually one of the first horror that I ever read, and it still has stuck with me as one of my favorites since then, which is Near the Bone by Christina Henry. I ate this story up. If you like No Exit by Taylor Adams, if you're a thriller fan, I highly recommend this. I think that this is like one of the most perfect beginner horror stories in my opinion. It has a level of like thriller excitement, but with a feeling of dread that I feel like horror gives me more than thrillers. What are you doing? In this story, we're following our main character, Maddie, who cannot remember a time that she didn't live with William. And as her life has gone on, she has come up with things that she cannot do to make William angry, because she doesn't want William to ever be angry. But when Maddie discovers a mutilated body on top of this mountain that they live on, she realizes that they might not be alone. There's something in the woods that wasn't there before, something with sharp claws, and that's making sounds in the night. And throughout this story, Maddie has to essentially decide whether she would rather face the monster inside or the monster outside. And I just think that this was such an incredible story, and I loved it so much. Like, I had so much fun reading this. In the fifth spot is Clown in the Cornfield. This is the second one, but 1 and 2 are interchangeable for me. I loved both of them just as much, like equally my favorite story. This is a YA slasher following some kids in a town where a clown tries to kill them. I think that's all you need to know going into this story. It is fun because it's a slasher, it's YA. There is a lot of gore. I was not expecting the amount of gore in this because it is YA. And the other thing that I love about this, obviously Adam Caesar has showed up twice on this list. I do really like his stuff, is the amount of like politics and discussion on real world nuance that he puts into this while having this fun slasher. I was not expecting that in this at all, and I really enjoyed it. I think that it added so many levels to the story. That's all. I feel like I don't need to talk about this one quite a bit. If you are looking for a fun slasher, definitely pick this one up. It reads so quickly, and the second one, which I'm holding up, is also just as good. Fourth on this list is From Below by Darcy Coates. This is a underwater horror that I loved. We're following our crew who is on a mission to make a documentary about a ship that had gone missing and is at the bottom of the sea. And they are going to be the first people to ever explore these ruins, and they have to dive really far under the water to see the ruins, but not all is as it seems under the water. We also have a secondary timeline that goes over what happened on the ship that went down. The more I think about this book, the more I feel like it was such an interesting and engaging story. And when they're underwater, I felt so claustrophobic. I think Darcy Coates does such a good job of atmosphere, and the underwater atmosphere in this was so dang creepy in my opinion. And like, I'm terrified of under the water because like, we don't know what's down there. We have no freaking clue what could be down there lurking in the deeps, and it just like creeps me out. And I think that this book really preyed on that fear and like the fear of the unknown and things like that I really did enjoy. If you do know, Darcy Coates writes haunted house stories typically, so there is a little bit element of that within the story as well. I find Darcy to be pretty cozy horror. Although this book had me feeling like on edge, I will say it's one of the most beginner friendly horror books because Darcy is just like cozy in the way that she wraps things up and writes stories. Darcy is the #1 author that I recommend for people to start with. She has such a great backlist, and I loved From Below. Similarly, we have in the third spot Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This is also a underwater type horror. We're following our crew who is going to figure out what happened to another ship. Similar premises, but they're very different stories in my opinion. In this one, they think that the last ship was attacked by killer mermaids, but they're trying to figure out if that was real or that was fake and like what's going on. We follow a bunch of scientists in this as they explore what happened, as well as like some news people and just some like assistants and things like that, and you see really how a lot of people react in a situation like this. This was so much fun, and like the science in this really made me realize that I love sci-fi horror because although what was happening was very scary within this story, I loved seeing how the scientists react about like their research and stuff, and it almost made it less scary to me, but like still horrifying at the same time, because like why is that more precious than your life? And I don't know, I had a lot of fun. I think that this is a page turner for sure. The audiobook is really, really good, so I really, really recommend it. If you're looking for just like underwater horror, Into the Drowning Deep is a elite recommendation in my opinion. You cannot get better than Into the Drowning Deep. In second place, we have another Darcy Coates. We have Gallows Hill by Darcy Coates. This one is so good. We are following a haunted winery in this one, and we're following our main character who, when her parents die, she inherits their winery, but she never knew her parents because they sent her to live with her grandmother when she was young. And she's trying to figure out what is so odd about this winery. I really, really loved this one because it just gave me the best spooky atmosphere in a very normal, reactionary way. Like, our character will notice something's off and she'll try to like mentally explain it, and I feel like that is so real to actual human emotion. Like, if I saw a cupboard left open, I'm not automatically assuming a ghost did it. I'm gonna be like, oh, well, I thought I closed that, but like maybe I didn't, and like kind of like reason with myself why it wouldn't be a ghost or some like supernatural creature or something like that. And I think that our character really does that, and that almost makes it more terrifying because you know, and you're just like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And I think that this was such a fun ride. This is a page turner for sure. This is my favorite Darcy Coates, obviously, and I think it's incredible. Definitely pick up Gallows Hill. I mean, it's a haunted winery. Does it get better than that? And the number one spot on this list, I feel like if you've been on my channel this year, you probably know what this is. It's Ghost Eaters by Clay McCoy Chapman. I loved this story. I loved it so much. This follows our main character who has kind of been in the wrong crowd her entire life. She has been dating this guy named Silas off and on for her life, and he's a druggie and gets her into drugs and stuff. But it's been 3 years since she last saw him. She's doing pretty well, has a new job, is kind of clean when he shows up at her door. And then 4 days later, he shows up dead. Apparently, he's doing this new drug called Ghost, and now in order to live through his memory, she also starts doing this drug. And from there, the story just gets weird and wacky and insane and incredible, and this was just like you were on drugs. Like, if the point of this was to make me feel like I was on a really, really weird trip, it did that. It 100% did that. I literally wanted to throw up at scenes in this because they're just like so gross and so fun and so amazing, and I just like really loved what the story was. But under all of that, there is this beautiful discussion on grief, and it is grief horror at its core, and I really enjoyed that. I think that this did kind of make me realize that maybe I do like grief horror, because I tried a few that I didn't like, and when it's done well, I think I really, really like it, because this is my favorite horror book. I just like can't explain the wild ride that Ghost Eaters is, and I think that everybody should read it. It's so good, incredible, amazing. My favorite horror book. There we have it. Those are my top 10 favorite horrors. Currently, this could change. I haven't read that much horror. I feel like I'm a newbie to horror, and I'm just really loving getting to know this genre and reading it more and more as the years go on. It's definitely a genre that has taken up a little place in my book-loving heart, because I think that it explores themes the way that fantasy does for me. The themes are like a backdrop to what's happening to our characters and things like that, but they are still there, and there's like nuance to the conversations and discussions, and that's something I look for in fantasy. It's something I look for in horror, and both are incredible mediums for that, in my opinion. So yeah, if you have never read horror, I would love to know if you try one of these, and if you are a horror fan, I would love some recommendations for some other horror books to read. I'm always looking for new ones to love, especially around this time of year. I tend to read horror in the winter months. If you made it all the way to the end of this video and you'd like to leave me an emoji just to say you were here, leave me a ghost emoji. That's upside down. A ghost emoji. And then if you want to connect with me on other platforms, my Bookstagram, my Book Twitter, my Goodreads, and my Patreon, all linked in the description bar below. Have yourselves an absolutely incredible day.